What's up guys? In today's video I'm going to be sharing with you how I review my trading. It's a really good time for me to make this video because the past week my trading performance really dropped off quite a bit, and it's good to kind of understand that we go through ebbs and flows in performance. In February I performed at a pretty high level, and in March so far I haven't, and that's fine. We all have a sort of grade between our A and our C game. I was trading probably close to my A game in February, and in March I slipped closer and closer and ended up kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say fully in a C game style, but it was certainly the same kind of mistake over again. I also like sharing my mistakes because I think it shows, first of all, that I'm not going to be at any point one of those traders who's like, I just win all the time, because no one does. And it's also it's very difficult to just talk about problems hypothetically. It's much easier to give an actual example of when I'm struggling, when I've made mistakes, what it looks like to review those and actually make progress going forward. So I'm going to gonna jump straight into my journal. And if you've watched any of my series on how I got funded, you will have seen this. And I'm going to go through and I'm just going to try to understand two things first of all. Or I'll go through that in a second. But the two things try to understand are the mental game, or sort of like my where the mistakes in my psychology began coming in, because normally as your psychology weakens you're more likely to make mistakes, and then what those mistakes looked like. So I like to kind of see, okay, what was the underlying reason for a mistake, and then what does that mistake look like. A lot of people just jump in straight to what the mistake looks like, and then they try and force themselves to fix that when in fact they've got to fix the psychology side. So to start off with how I track my trading anyway, this is my journal. I have this very key column down here, which is accuracy, and this very key column down here, which is my grade. Regardless of the profit on the trade, I will give myself an accuracy of 0 or 1, 0 being I made a mistake, 1 being I executed perfectly, and a grade, A being executed perfectly, B being I made a mistake that maybe I haven't made before or was surprising to me, and C, which is when I've made a mistake that I have made in the past and I've repeated it, which becomes a mental game error. The C game trades are the ones where you say, I'm aware that I give into FOMO, and then you give into FOMO. Okay? The C game trades often are patterns, and the B games are something brand new. So that's how I keep track of my trades, and then I also track my accuracy and compare where I am currently compared to the potential. Now I know that I'm very unlikely to ever achieve 100% potential in a month. If I do, at some point I'm going to be really happy. My goal is to get to 75 to 80% of it. If I achieve that, I'm pretty happy, and I know that my accuracy level is going to be pretty decent. My accuracy this month is currently at 60%, which is the lowest it has been, I think, for a long time. I will say just before I go any further that part of this has been down to the last few days having, because the issue you'll see is the same issue every time. The problem that I have, it's a fairly new one that I haven't really had to deal with before, and every single trade that I took, although technically is a mistake, it's one that it was very easy to make. It wasn't something that was like, you know, that definitely wasn't my setup. It was like, this was very nearly my setup. For me, I'm holding myself to very high standards, but that's what it is. So although my accuracy is low, it's probably not quite that low, if I'm being completely honest. But it's always better to be too harsh on yourself and then make adjustments because of it. So yeah, so I'll go through each trade. So there has also been a little bit of misfortune and adjustments to my strategy. So this is kind of a little bit out of whack with where I actually am with things in terms of potential profit and stuff like that, but I'll talk through that. So the very first trade I took in this month was, at the time of taking it, a completely legitimate trade. And as you can see, I got to around about 98% of my profit target. Sucks because I don't move my stop. A lot of times it still works out. I worked out that if I have a trade that goes 75% or more in my favor and then comes back to the entry point, there is still a greater than 50% chance of it hitting my profit target. So in other words, I have the same win percentage even after that than I do when I first take the trade, so definitely don't want to get out of it. But interestingly, the note I put here is it was unbelievable to get 98% to profit and then take a loss. We also then just missed out on a short that would have been a winner because we were in that trade and we just missed out by like 1% on another rule that I created. And this is the crucial part here. I was in the mentality of going, this cost us, when I say us, me, 8R. I was -1 instead of a 1 plus 1.8 and then another plus 5R trade. And that really begins to set the scene that in my mind I was starting to go where I could be, how much this has cost me because I'm trading larger size on the fund account than I have in the past with real money. All of a sudden it's like, holy shit, 8R is, for me, $3,200, which is a substantial amount of money. It's a month's salary. So I begin to look at the money a little bit. The next trade I took was, I would say, completely legitimate. There was a very small amount of doubt in this one, but it meets my criteria. It's a good trade. I then missed out on a trade, and this day was a pretty strange one because with the rules that I have in place, had I taken this trade, I'd have been down 800 on the day and stopped trading with my account at the size it's at right now. I didn't take this, and the reason I didn't take it is I actually had a very strange situation where I had a trade set up and I wasn't actually certain if I was going to take it or not. I wasn't completely certain if it was my setup, and as a result I didn't take it. This was about half an hour before this trade triggered, and I did not want to enter the same trade but lower down in case I should have taken that first trade, making this trade invalid. So it was a very strange situation which I hadn't faced before. I didn't take either of those trades, which is the correct approach. If you are ever not sure, do not take the trade. Next trade I took, executed it perfectly. We had a really, really nice trend break. I got in long and we had a nice winner. However, I then missed out on a trade. And the reason I missed out on the trade was largely down to the fact that I had kind of felt like this whole trade here, it was, I was in it for quite a while. And the whole time I was like, what if this ends up selling off and it's a loss? That would mean that I've made, and maybe that first trade that I didn't take would then be a winner. Maybe I've made a really costly mistake. So I'm starting to look, instead of like, this is a trade, I'm happy with it, can't control it, I've done this, etc. Instead, I've fallen into the trap of thinking, oh no, how much money could I have made? Could I have lost? And that wears down on you when you're looking at the P&L. I don't look at the P&L, but when you're aware of it, it does grind on you. And you can see here that the next trade that I didn't take, and it's a completely legitimate trade, it's probably the best trade that you could probably have in the scenario that we're in. I had an emotional hangover from the mess of the day. I didn't want to give up the profits that I had taken, and I'd spent 2 hours thinking about things. And I was also in the back of my mind also aware of the bad luck I'd had, and therefore I just wanted to stop trading for the day. Missed out on that one. Not the worst mistake, it's acceptable. Now, the next two trades were just well executed, and there was a little bit of bad luck in this because I took these two trades with the latest rules that I have in place now. The second trade I wouldn't have taken, which is unfortunate. I didn't have that rule in place because the next trade on that day was a winner. I didn't get to take that with full size, so there's a slight bit of emotion coming in on there as well. I'm really looking at it and saying, wow, I've just missed out on quite a large amount of money because of not being able to take this trade. And the thing is, this next trade as well would not have been a trade under the new rules, and there would have been another very large winning trade that I'd have taken. So at this point, coming to the end of the third, this was the end of last week, I was kind of like, I've been really, really unlucky here. And some of it is just bad luck. I traded fairly well for the most part. I missed out on two very, very large winning trades as a result of the rules that I've got in place, me sticking to rules. But at the same time, not taking this trade, which was a mistake, actually made me money. So kind of ebbs and flows. It was a weird feeling to know that I, quote unquote, could be up 14R, and instead I'm, break even, I think, on the week, down slightly on my larger account. But I can't help that. I followed my rules fairly well throughout that week, and I also followed the rules that I have for my sizing pretty much on point. So up until this point, the mistakes weren't that bad. However, as we go into next week, or this week just gone, things began changing a little bit, and I execute really well on this trade, and I also execute well on this trade. However, there was an element of this. You see how it bounced a couple of times? I actually let out my first sort of like signs of frustration physically when this trade bounced, because it definitely felt like, I had missed out on a winning trade. In the end, it came down. I took the profit from it, and it was all good. But I was starting to really feel the emotion building more, even when I executed really well. On the 7th, it was my birthday, so I didn't trade, and I was very aware that I had missed out on a winning trade. Now, I'm not going to complain about that. I had an amazing birthday, and it comes way above trading, but it's all building again, how much I've missed out on, how unlucky I've been. And what then happens is that stress begins to take focus a little bit away from accuracy and focus more on we've got to find a trade. I am not going to miss out on any more. And I think that that is kind of where these next mistakes came in. So on this day here, the trend line that I drew, I actually said to my trading buddy that this does not reflect price enough and therefore I'm not going to take the trade. But we argued about it, and I once, because of the emotional stress I was already under, not wanting to miss another trade, in the end I took it and made the mistake. So the raw mistake here was the trend line that I drew was this wasn't a valid trend line that broke. The very next day, I had a very similar situation. Now, this trade, I would probably say, is not that far off being okay. The trend line that I draw does represent price for the most part. However, this was one where had I drawn the trend line that really reflected price, it would be a lot steeper and would break too early. And this therefore wouldn't have been a trade. So I take this trade, and at the time I was like, this is probably okay, but in fact it was probably a mistake. And the main mistake here is trying to draw trend lines to find a trade rather than drawing trend lines and reacting to them. And the same thing happened here as well. We had a trend line that set up, that broke, and I essentially just kept moving the trend line until I hit my time limit. So I was like, oh, now it's 25 minutes, so I can take the trade. Which means that I essentially forced two trades here, and that's where the alarm bells really began, playing for me. I didn't actually see that these were mistakes until later on in the day, but there was certainly a lot of frustration knowing that I was now in a situation where I haven't been taking full two sides. I've taken 3R of losses when I shouldn't have done after having a lot of misfortune. And then again, the emotion came out after this trade, a lot of frustration because again, the same thing happens where the trend line, it broke. This trend line I've drawn here is completely not valid. If I'd have drawn this trend line correctly, it broke, it sold off, didn't give me an opportunity to get in. This day, ironically enough, there was one trade that was a loss in terms of legitimate setups. So I didn't actually, and I didn't take that trade, so I didn't make or lose anything on this day. But it still feels, the emotion obviously is built. So it kind of gets to a point I'm like very aware, okay, I've got these mistakes. I feel like I'm in this bit of a rut. I'm making mistakes. I've been missing trades, all of that. What do I do? So I've created a very short plan, which we'll go through. So number one, and this is something I would suggest, this sort of plan I would actually suggest everybody to do if they feel like their performance has dropped. Number one is to size down. For me, my funded account is actually in a very healthy position right now if I size down to not even that small of a position size, where 1R is between 80 and 120. I need to double check on the rules of the funded account first. But the amount of profit, I think it's got about $1,400 of profit in it right now, which means if I size down to taking those $80 or $120 risk trades, I actually have around about 12 to 15R, which is a huge amount for my strategy. Definitely something that will mean the pressure of trying to make money should reduce slightly. When you begin to take the pressure off like that, you will find that you should be able to perform a little bit better, and if you don't perform better, it costs you less. The second thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to target an 80% or better accuracy for the next 15 trades. That will probably take me through to the end of the month. The idea behind this is 80% for me is my minimum accuracy threshold for making solid profit over the course of a month. I feel that if I drop below that, I'm at risk of not making very much and drawdowns being extended further than they should be, which puts my account at a larger risk. The size that I've been trading is completely legitimate and completely fine if I'm 100% accurate, and I need to be at least 80% to keep myself relatively safe. The next goal is to make at least 8R before sizing up. I don't look at profit all that much. I look way more accuracy. However, if I trade an 85% accuracy in the next 15 trades, but only make 2R because the strategy has weakened off a little bit, I don't want to increase size and feel that pressure again. I would rather wait until I've at least made back enough of the money that I have lost over this week or so to put my account at a point where I'm back at the sort of like the maximum drawdown, because right now I've got $1,400 left of drawdown. I would rather see that closer to the $2,500 just to be in the safe zone with that. So plus 8R is the minimum. I would potentially like it even more than that, but if I trade it at 80%, or if I say I trade at 100% accuracy over the next 15 trades and I make 8R, I would be more than happy to say I can size back up to the size I was trading before. My focus is going to be massively on how I draw my trend lines. This is, as you saw, the main issue. I need to have a very clear focus on that and reintroduce the rules of myself of if I'm not certain, don't take the trade. Missing a trade is far less damaging than taking a bad trade. And I would say 9 times out of 10, if I'm not sure, then it isn't a trade, because I've got pretty good at seeing what my strategy is. And those last 4 trades, every single one of them, I had an inkling of this isn't quite right, which I ignored. And then number 5 is to focus on mental game resolution. So I'm going to work pretty hard at focusing or understanding where the emotion came from. I'm going to try to essentially figure out what goes on behind the scenes in my mind when I think about bad luck and profit. At the end of the day, if I can't resolve that, then when I size up, I'm just going to experience the same thing. So it's important to actually get to the bottom of that. I'm not going to go through that in a video because it's going to take a lot of time, but find out the underlying mental game issue, find out the exact thoughts, and come up with a resolution to that. This is actually what I do in my own coaching. If you're interested in resolving a mental game issue, and I know I've just shown a video on how I've had a mental game issue recently, that's fine. Everybody does that. But if you have your own mental game problems, whether it's FOMO, fear, greed, frustration, whatever it is, what I'm going to do over the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in my own trading is exactly what I do with clients, with coaching. So check out the links down below for that. That's kind of it. That's my plan to improve. Everybody, everybody has their own down points in their trading. They slip up and they have worse trading than before. A really good way to look at it is to think of where your C game was and where it is now. For me, just bring this back up, these 4 trades are definitely not horrific errors. They're errors, but they're very small errors compared to what I was making 3 months ago. What that means is that my C game has been upgraded. My A game I know has been upgraded. And therefore, if I make another upgrade to my C game, we're going to be at a point where probably the next time I have a C game, a pullback to my C game, is probably going to be I'm still slightly profitable or break even. As you can see right now, my profit for the month is negative 1.43. The potential profit with the rules that I've had in place has only been 11R. So I've traded about as badly as I can kind of see myself trading at the moment. Combine that with a tiny little bit of bad luck, I suppose, in the early parts. And in terms of performance, I'm still pretty much breaking even, which is not too bad. The trick is to catch this now and then make it better. Get to a point where I'm back to trading my A and B game. And in 15 trades time, if I'm trading my A game more and more and more, is then to size up. So hope you enjoyed this video. It's just something that I wanted to share about my own trading and also how I plan to improve. And if you're struggling with your own trading, if you've gone through a period where you've been not performing very well, consider these kind of steps. Consider sizing down, setting accuracy targets, setting goals to step back up. If you do that, it protects your account. It gives you meaningful goals to progress and will get you back on track a lot quicker than just trying to plow through and do what you're doing.